we have our guest Chidu Gopi Mataji for our special Ekadashi series. Thank you very much, Mother Achita, for taking your time and joining us this morning to speak on Devananda Panditji. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. You can begin.
Thank you so much. It's so incredibly wonderful to be back with everyone again. It felt like the break was much longer than just a few weeks, but just goes to show how what Sriman Mahaprabhu has said is completely true. Without our devotees and without Krishna, it kind of feels like every moment can be like a yuga, 12 years or more. So I'm so glad to be back with everyone. Today we'll be trying to dive into the glories of Devananda Pandit and the glories of faith. So we'll see how his heart is transformed and what happens with this wonderful and kind of miraculous pastime. But of course, before that, we'll begin with our Mangala Charana. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So Devananda Pandit finds himself within the pages of Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. He finds himself mentioned within the pages of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. He finds himself mentioned within the accounts of Gaur Ganodesh Dipika. He finds himself mentioned within Sri Chaitanya Mangala. So he is highly mentioned throughout so many of our accounts on the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In fact, we hear from that Gaur Ganodesh Dipika that previously Devananda Pandit was known as Bandari Muni, who was the Sabha Pandit, or the royal Pandit for Nanda Maharaj. And each day he would regale the citizens of Vrindavan and those who lived within Nanda Bhavan with the stories from Vedic literature. So Devananda Pandit was a scholar, a Brahmin. He was renounced. He was a wealth of good qualities. And he would preach exclusively from one literature and one literature alone. He would only ever preach from Srimad Bhagavatam. He knew Srimad Bhagavatam like the back of his hand, forwards, backwards. However, he would preach Srimad Bhagavatam and never mention devotion. Somehow or other, he would read Bhagavatam, preach from Bhagavatam, and never mention bhakti. So herein lies the problem. And accounts state that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had much to say about many of these things. But he says When those bereft of devotion forget their actual identity, they become completely indifferent to the service of the Lord. When they identify this indifference as the ultimate goal of life, they become a source of profound irritation to the Lord, even though he is by nature supremely merciful. So this recitation of Bhagavatam without the emphasis of bhakti caused the heart of Devananda Pandit to now become a source of irritation for the Lord of the universe, Lord Gaurasundar, who is known for his magnanimity. He's known for his benevolent nature. He's known for being the most merciful. However, we get a very valuable lesson, even just from the beginning of this pastime, that you can know all of the scriptures. You can be the most renounced personality. In fact, Devananda Pandit was renounced. He was an emblem of renunciation. You could have all of the ABCs lined up. You could, on the outside, look as though you have the perfect exterior. But if you have a heart which is devoid of devotion, a heart devoid of faith in the Vaishnavas and faith in the Lord himself, if you have a heart which is devoid of bhakti, somehow now all of those other good qualities just serve to become a source of irritation for the Lord of the universe. So we'll journey into the pages of Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat to see what will transpire for Devananda Pandit. Devananda Pandit was a teacher of Srimad Bhagavatam, but unfortunately, he was devoid of any devotion for the Supreme Lord. People considered him to be an authority on Srimad Bhagavatam, but actually, he was unacquainted with the essence of that great work. Simply stated, the dormant feelings of devotion for the Lord had not yet stirred within Devananda Pandit's heart. Only Krishna knows what offenses were the cause of such great misfortune. I had a conversation with a friend, and she was expressing that we often hear that bhakti comes from bhakti. In order to get this devotion, we have to somehow seek out this devotion. But she was thinking, if bhakti comes from bhakti and all of these things, how is it possible that I'll ever make any advancement? Sometimes it feels like I'm so far away from that goal, so far away from developing bhakti within the heart, then searching out bhakti and trying to find it. Where is there any hope? And I was remarking and reflecting that this has always been a realization that I've tried to cling to. This one line, simply stated, the dormant feelings of devotion for the Lord had not yet stirred within Devananda Pandit's heart. How wonderful is it that bhakti comes from bhakti? However, this bhakti, devotional service, these loving feelings for the Supreme Lord, which can transform our lives and give us the greatest benediction, are already present. We already have it. Sometimes we forget. Sometimes it's lying dormant. But the hope is that it's already there. Love for Krishna is already our right. Srila Prabhupada, in this instance, often exclaims that we simply must just reclaim it. We simply just have to reawaken our identity. So there's great hope in that. That even though we're on this path of spiritual realization, on these paths of trying to find out how we can better acquaint ourselves spiritually, better situate ourselves. All is not lost. It's not that we have to completely change ourselves. It's not that we have to gather a new identity. We seek out those who have already reawakened their own identities in an effort to find out, okay, what did you do? What worked for you? Tell me how I can somehow just get to this point where you are. And so we find these yearnings within our hearts to find these gurus, these mentors, these guides on the path of divine love. Not to give us something that we don't already have, but to give us the tips and the tricks and the spiritual life hacks that will help us reawaken what is already there. So Devananda Pandit, unfortunately, was completely covered over to an extent where this great, the greatest essence of Bhagavatam was hidden to him. It so happened, by divine arrangement, that as the Lord and his associates were passing by, Devananda Pandit was lecturing on Srimad Bhagavatam. The omniscient Lord overheard the discussions, which were completely devoid of references to the devotional service of the Lord, becoming enraged because, once again, we heard his heart now had become a source of irritation for the Lord. So now, the Lord, who is usually very mild-mannered, very sweet-natured, now Lord Chaitanya becomes enraged. The Lord exclaimed, "What right does this man have to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam? He's completely ignorant of its essential message. Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of Lord Krishna. It is the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. This fool does not know anything about Bhagavatam. He tirelessly toils, explaining the Bhagavatam without even mentioning devotional service. Today, I will tear his explanation to shreds." The Lord seemed intent to rush off and carry out his resolve, and so the devotees surrounded him and tried to dissuade him. It even says in greater description, the Bhagavatam promotes bhakti as the ultimate goal of life. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continues his rant. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence of the four Vedas. It is the literary form of divine love. The four Vedas are like milk. The Srimad Bhagavatam is like butter. Shukadev Goswami is the churner of that butter, which is eaten then by Parikshit Maharaj. That Shukadev Goswami, who is dear to me, knows the meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadev Goswami has expressed truths about my very self. He has expressed my own opinions. Me and my servants are glorified in the Srimad Bhagavatam. One who finds a difference between myself and my servants will find all his good intelligence destroyed. An irreligious person who rejects bhakti and finds some other meaning in the Srimad Bhagavatam will never understand Bhagavatam. After saying all these things in an angry mood, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to flee from the house of Devananda Pandit, which he considers condemned. The devotees still caught hold of him and begged him not to go. Here is an incredibly graphic lesson. Our readings of Srimad Bhagavatam, our hearings of all of these great scriptures should cause a flood of bhakti within our hearts. Somehow we should yearn to listen and develop a love. Even if sometimes we find that we are not able to maintain our focus for the entirety of the duration of the reading, somehow if we can find one sentence to cling to that makes us remember, this is why I love Krishna. And this reminds me of why Krishna loves me. If we can cling to one sentence, one phrase, one line, one word, this will bring us closer to Krishna. And if we cannot find anything, with which to remind us of the love of Krishna. Well, we see what happens to Devananda Pandit. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu starts to flee his house, which to me is quite symbolic. We have the heart wherein all of these realizations can occur, but now Mahaprabhu is fleeing from this place, not finding love in these wonderful recitations and narrations will cause the Lord of the heart to distance himself from our own hearts and consider that place condemned. The Lord was fond of roaming around Navadvip, accompanied by his associates. One day, he came to the outskirts of town. There, he happened to pass a place for drinking alcoholic beverages. When he smelled the alcohol, the Lord was reminded of Varuni, an intoxicating drink made from honey that is the favorite of Lord Balaram. This caused the Lord to become absorbed in the mood of Sri Balaram. In a trance, he shouted to Srivas Pandit, "Let's go inside." Srivas fell at the Lord's lotus feet and begged him not to do so. But the Lord responded, "Do I also have to be restricted by rules and regulations?" Srivas Pandit explained, "My Lord, you are the universal father and perfect example. If you transgress social rules, then who is left to uphold them? And those who criticize you out of ignorance will certainly have to suffer for many lifetimes. You are the emblem of religious principles. Who will be able to make sense of this pastime that you are preparing to perform? If you insist on going into the bar, I shall drown myself in the Ganga." Smiling, the Lord replied, "I do not want to go against your wish, and so I will not go inside." So what's the lesson of this very unique pastime? Mahaprabhu wants to go into a bar. Srivas Pandit forbids him to do so. "I will drown myself in the Ganga," but why? Does he think that Lord Chaitanya will be contaminated in any way, shape, or form? Of course not. But herein lies the lesson of the compassionate heart of a Vaishnava. Srivas Pandit knows no one will be able to make sense of this. They will not be able to make heads or tails of this. The people of Navadvip already see you as a very eccentric personality. They may already be making offenses toward you. But if they see you go into this bar, into this tavern, who knows what you will do in your maddened state of divine ecstatic love? I won't be able to hold you back. And if you do something that could be considered somehow against religious principles, these people of Navadvip will further offend you. They will further say things that will just hurt my heart. And I won't be able to tolerate hearing this. Hearing their words of mistaken, of all kinds of misunderstandings against your nature and your personality will just make me want to give up my life. So, with all of that subtext, what he says outwardly is, if you go in there, I'll drown myself in the Ganga. Mahaprabhu, after all, is Paramatma. Understanding the full nature of the heart of Srivas Pandit, finally he says, fine, I won't go. But he understands that it's not about Mahaprabhu following any rules and regulations. He is the be-all, end-all of all rules and regulations. They should all be followed just to attain his association. One glance from him, that's it. But he knows that really it's about protecting the heart of Srivas and protecting the citizens of Navadvip against committing further offenses toward the Supreme Lord. Indeed, the Lord gradually gave up the mood of Lord Balaram and continued on his way. When the drunkards inside the bar saw Nimai Pandit pass by, they became excited and loudly called out, "Hari, Hari!" One of them said, "That Nimai Pandit is a good and honorable person. I like his behavior, especially the way he chants and dances." It's often said that one can understand the nature of a person that they can fully identify with. These drunkards were very fond of being unabashed in their expression of their happiness and their joy. And so they could understand the behavior of someone else who was completely free to act as they felt. So they said, I like his behavior, especially the way he chants and dances. Some of the drunkards stood up. While clapping their hands, they began to hop around in an attempt to dance, thinking to go out and meet Nimai in the street. Swaying unsteadily, not unlike Mahaprabhu himself, they chanted, Haribol, Haribol, Jai Narayan, and danced joyfully. In fact, the whole bar became a scene of joyful chanting of the holy names of the Lord. The Lord was pleased by these attempts of the drunkards. Srivas Pandit's heart melted as he considered the Lord's wonderful potency. These drunkards were happy to see Lord Chaitanya, whereas envious persons criticized him. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, the author, then says, I offer my obeisances to anyone who beholds the Supreme Lord with faith, even though he may be a drunkard. The Lord blessed the drunkards with his glance and then went on his way. What does all this have to do with Devananda Pandit? Devananda Pandit had a heart devoid of faith, a heart devoid of devotion. And the love that was lying dormant was held so tightly captive that he was ruled by rules and regulations. In fact, he showed no emotion when reading Srimad Bhagavatam, even though he studied it to perfection. And that caused the Lord to run away from his house and consider it condemned. These drunkards, just on the faith within their heart, were not following rules and regulations. But what they could see was, I like this Nimai. He chants and he dances. I can do that. Let me follow what he said. Haribol, Haribol. Just on the basis of that, Mahaprabhu wanted to run and associate with them. So whereas he is running away from this scholar, he is running towards these drunkards just on the basis that their hearts are filled with faith and love and a devotion and a yearning to express that. We hear of a similar story of another scholar, another Brahmin, whose heart has become devoid of devotion due to their transcendental learning of Vedic scripture. Another Ekadashi story. We hear of Durvasa Muni in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, who goes and he seeks the audience of Maharaj Ambarish, who had been fasting on Ekadashi. The very next day on Dwadasi, Maharaj Ambarish goes to break his Ekadashi fast, and Durvasa Muni arrives on the scene and says, you must feed me. Maharaj Ambarish says, it is my absolute honor to welcome a guest such as yourself, please. But there's a specific time in which to break an Ekadashi fast, to complete this vow of Ekadashi. And that time was drawing near. However, Maharaj Ambarish knew that he could not take part in his prasadam before his guest. So he took the counsel of some sages. He says, what can I do? I want to somehow please the Lord by my vow of fasting on Ekadashi. And in order to complete this vow, I want to break my fast on time. But now I have a very exalted guest and I cannot eat before him. What can I do? The sages said, in order to fast on Ekadashi, you would not eat or drink. So, if you take a sip of water, sipping water is considered eating and not eating. If you have been fasting from water, if you take a sip, you will be considered to have completed your vow, but also you have not eaten. So then you will be able to honor your guest and not eat before him. Maharaj Ambarish dutifully, with the prayers of the Lord in his heart and in his mind, he takes a sip of water. Durvasa Muni becomes enraged. How could you? I came as your guest and you've done something else before attending to me? For this offense, I'll curse you. with condemnation. You will be devastated. All results of your pious activities will be reduced to ashes. Everything that you know, everything that you have tried to continue to please the Lord will be reduced to nothing. Maharaj Ambarish was silent. He was forlorn. He felt completely devastated. He wanted to fall at the feet of Durvasa Muni and beg for his forgiveness, but Durvasa Muni was not hearing any of it. However, suddenly, this Sudarshan Chakra appears on the scene to protect Maharaj Ambarish. Because Durvasa Muni he's invoking by his curse a fearsome demon that will come and even kill Maharaj Ambarish. This is how far Durvasa Muni has gone in his anger from one small act. So this demon invoked by the anger of Durvasa Muni wants to completely eradicate, kill Maharaj Ambarish. Sudarshan Chakra comes to protect him. Not only does Sudarshan Chakra come to protect Maharaj Ambarish and devastate this demon, but now the Sudarshan Chakra is now wanting to consume Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni flees all over the universe, to all the different heads of the universe, the presiding deities of the universe, Lord Brahma, and even Lord Shiva himself, whom Durvasa Muni is a partial expansion of. No one can help Durvasa Muni from the wrath of the Sudarshan Chakra, who is following him hot on his tail. Finally, he comes to the abode of Lord Narayan, falls at the feet of the Lord and says, "My Lord, save me. You must. I am a Brahmin. You are known as one who is kind to the Brahmins. You are forever extolled within the Vedic literatures. You are kind to the cows and to the Brahmins. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagadditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha." Says, "You must protect me. I'm a Brahmin." And Lord Narayan says, "While I understand that you are a Brahmin, my heart is no longer sympathetic to your plight. You're on your own." Durvasa Muni is stunned. What will happen to me? What will happen to all of the Brahmins? What kind of precedent will this set for eons to come? Lord Narayan says, "What kind of precedent have you been setting for eons to come? You've gone and created trouble for my devotee. You've thought yourself superior to my devotee. On what basis? That you are a Brahmin? That you have studied some Brahminical culture? Brahmins are supposed to teach the other varnas and ashrams within Vedic culture. What have you taught? You've roamed around the universe just being angry for no reason. My devotee sought to please me by fasting on Ekadashi. He had no other goal other than my pleasure within his heart. He was not fasting on Ekadashi for some pious merit or to eradicate his own sins. All he thought was to please me, and you thought to curse him? I cannot be sympathetic to you. Though you may be a Brahmin, my heart has become hardened to you. I don't even desire to look in your direction." Durvasa Muni says, "I've studied everything. I've studied Vedic literatures. I have done penance for thousands of years on your lotus feet." And he says, "And what has it gotten you?" Lord Narayan says, "You've studied all of these Vedic literatures, but you have no love for me or my devotees. And so because you have studied all of this Vedic literature, but you have not developed love or faith in me or my devotees, this study has made your heart a spiritual wasteland. Your heart is like a desert, devoid of the oasis of bhakti. There is no nectar to be had anywhere within your heart. I can't help you." Durvasa Muni says, well, then what will I do? What am I supposed to do? Where will I find some help? Lord Narayan says, "I can't help you. The only thing that can help you is going back to Maharaj Ambarish. going back to that devotee who you so blasphemed, who you criticized, who you sought to devastate and destroy. Go back to him, fall at his feet, and see if he will forgive you. If he can forgive you, then maybe my Sudarshan chakra will alleviate its hotness. Maybe it will spare you. Other than that, I can do nothing. And in fact, the Lord of the universe, Lord Narayan, who is seated within everyone's heart, guiding the wanderings of the living entity, as Krishna so aptly says within Bhagavad Gita, he disappears from the vision of Durvasa Muni. So again, we see what happens when all of our knowledge does not arrive at the very doorstep of bhakti and devotional divine love. If all of our knowledge takes us anywhere else, it causes the Lord of the heart to disappear. And no, he doesn't ever leave the heart, but he can disguise himself until he is unrecognizable to us. And what kind of misfortune would that be? Durvasa Muni does go, and he falls at the feet of Maharaj Ambarish, begging for forgiveness. And of course, Maharaj Ambarish lifts him up and he says, "You are a great sage. I hold no ill will towards you. I consider that anything you might have said was for my own benefit, but I just hope that I did not offend you in any way. Please, just be pleased with me." And in this moment, Durvasa Muni realizes the greatness of the devotees of the Lord who can somehow consider above all else, above their own pride, above their own welfare. They just think, let me not offend another Vaishnav. Let me not offend someone else who might be dear to Krishna, my Krishna. In great humility, Durvasa Muni embraces Maharaj Ambarish and prays to never again be consumed by this thought process of I am superior to another. I have studied more than this person. This person cannot be considered a Vaishnav because they have not done this, that, or the third. This is the example of what we see with Devananda Pandit. He has now distanced himself from the Lord of the heart. And an existence like that can only have one fate. This fate is miserable. You find no happiness anywhere. And ultimately, a fate of one who has distanced themselves from the Lord of the heart by turning their heart into a spiritual wasteland, into a spiritual desert. Ultimately, what comes is Vaishnav Aparad, committing offenses to a Vaishnav, which we see with Durvasa Muni, and which we will see with Devananda Pandit. So the Lord blessed the drunkards, and then he left. After walking some distance, Lord Chaitanya saw Devananda Pandit coming in the opposite direction. Upon seeing him, the Lord felt rage rising within him as he remembered an incident from long ago when Devananda Pandit had offended Srivas Pandit. This had occurred when Nimai was in the mood of a scholar before he even inaugurated the Sankirtan movement in earnest. One day, Devananda Pandit was teaching Srimad Bhagavatam to a group of students. Desiring to hear that great literature, Srivas went to where Devananda was lecturing to a large audience. Every syllable of Srimad Bhagavatam is saturated with the nectar of love of God. As Srivas Pandit listened, his heart melted with transcendental ecstasy. When Srivas began to breathe heavily and cry, the students next to him felt disturbed. The mundane, agnostic students complained, "This man is creating a nuisance. How can we study if he goes on like this?" Being absorbed in ecstasy, Srivas could not even hear the comments. As tears streamed from Srivas's eyes, the students plotted and then dragged him out of the assembly. The teacher, Devananda Pandit, did not object, for he was of a similar mentality. When Srivas came out of his trance and saw that he was in the street, he felt very saddened and returned home. Now, as Lord Vishwambar, the maintainer of all the universes, saw Devananda Pandit approaching, he vividly remembered this incident. For after all, he is the Paramatma within everyone's heart. The Lord accosted him with angry words. Hey, Devananda! Once, a devotee named Srivas Pandit attended one of your discourses on Srimad Bhagavatam and then was dragged out of his assembly by your students. Being absorbed in listening to the pastimes of the Lord, he cried, being moved by spiritual emotions. What was his offense? Should Srivas Pandit have been treated with contempt and dragged out of the assembly? This was a great offense on your part. Maybe you pose as a teacher of Srimad Bhagavatam, but you do not have even the slightest understanding of its purpose. When a person has eaten to his full satisfaction, only then does he feel amicably disposed to the world around him. As for you, although you teach others, you yourself cannot even relish even a bit of the divine nectar that can give one unlimited, transcendental pleasure. Devananda Pandit, who was a very learned Brahmin, felt very ashamed while hearing the Lord's chastisement, and so he remained silent. Lord Vishwambar finished speaking and then departed. In very many tellings, he tells Devananda Pandit, you will never understand Srimad Bhagavatam, even in countless lifetimes. All of your study has been for nothing. You failed. And then he leaves. Devananda Pandit also returned home feeling broken and dejected. Although the Lord chastised Devananda, it was to the Pandit's great fortune. To be chastised by Lord Chaitanya is indeed a rare blessing. Even the demons that were killed by the Lord attain the spiritual world. Later on, we find out what happens to Devananda Pandit. 5 years pass. Mahaprabhu takes sannyas, and he goes traveling. In the midst of traveling, he moves from Jagannath Puri back to Navadvip once more, with one desire in his heart. This desire is, the Lord thinks to himself, I will travel back to Navadvip, and I will forgive all of the offenses for anyone who's ever committed them against me. And so the Lord travels back to Navadvip, and a great festival occurs. Everywhere there are people gaining the glance and the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Everywhere there are people drowning in the ocean of divine love. Everywhere there are people showing ecstatic symptoms by gaining the favor of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this is so wonderful because how merciful is our Lord? You are never too far gone. Even if you have committed Vaisnava aparad, which they say there's no coming back from, still, you're never too far gone. The Lord will devise another way to try and rope your heart back in. Ever eager to relish pastimes with his devotees who are everyone, some time may pass, but he will find another way to rope you back into his association, either by hook or by crook. So how merciful is our Supreme Lord that now he decides, I will go back to Navadvip, and on the way, and while I find myself in Navadvip, I will forgive all offenses. This place becomes known, this place of Kulia, where Devananda Pandit was residing. This place of Kulia within Navadvip, where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then goes to forgive all of the offenses, becomes known as Aparad Bhanjana. Let's make sure I got that right. The place where all aparads are forgiven. The place of amnesty. So he inaugurates this new place of amnesty within Navadvip, forgiving anyone and everyone. And at this place, there is a Brahmin who enters in the house of Vidyavachaspati, where the Lord had taken up his residence at this moment to forgive everyone. The Brahmin enters and immediately begins to touch the feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He catches hold of his lotus feet and says, "Oh, my Lord, I have a prayer. Without understanding things properly, I committed a grievous offense by criticizing a Vaishnav. I used to taunt him by shouting, 'In Kali Yuga, who can be a real Vaishnav? What is this nonsense kirtan?' In this way, I condemned myself. Whenever I remember this, my mind burns with grief. Oh, my Lord, kindly tell me, how can I atone for my sins?" Here is the beginnings of surrender. We often ask the question, how can we surrender? How can we become more humble? It begins with being honest. And, not the kind of like honesty where we have a conversation with another Vaishnav and we say things like, and this has happened to me. Someone will say, Mataji, I am your servant. I am your obedient Vaishnav servant. Mataji, I am nothing in front of you. I am so fallen. And after that prologue, they proceed to tell me everything that they think that I've done wrong. So here we have this Brahmin who admits. The first thing he does, and he goes and he admits to the Lord verbally. He admits, I have a problem. I've done this thing. I have criticized these Vaishnavas, thinking, who can be a real Vaishnav in this Kali Yuga? You can't follow these rules and regulations. What is this nonsense kirtan that you're doing? You're not chanting properly. You're not even doing any of these things properly, and you think there's going to be some advancement made. How many times have we found ourselves in a similar mindset, thinking a similar thing, feeling a similar sentiment, whether we've said it or not? Sometimes we catch ourselves before we say it. Sometimes it slips out, especially in the realm of social media, where it's so easy to kind of type things out before we think about it. Oh, and then it's out. And this Brahmin says, in this way, I've condemned myself. I don't know what can become of my fate. What can I do? From that moment of being honest, really, actually saying, I've done this, and this is a problem. The response of the Lord is this. Lord Chaitanya smiled benignly upon hearing the Brahmin's straightforward and honest confession. If we are able to honestly look at our faults, and not the honesty of, oh, I've admitted my fault and now I'll just go and do it again, but really honestly looking at our faults with an earnest willingness and a desire to change that fault, the Lord smiles upon us benignly. He said, if one who has consumed poison drinks Amrit, the nectar of immortality, gradually the effects of the poison weaken. Your criticisms were like drinking poison. Now you must drink the nectar of Lord Krishna's name and pastimes with the same mouth. Use the tongue that offended Vaishnavas to glorify them. I am telling you truly that this is the only means of purification for one who criticized devotees due to ignorance. If one gives up such offensive behavior and thereafter constantly glorifies the Supreme Lord and his unalloyed devotees, he totally destroys his sins. Otherwise, millions of penances and pious activities cannot counteract the offenses committed against a Vaishnav. The devotees were very happy to hear these instructions. And the very next visitor was Devananda Pandit. When Lord Chaitanya was still a grahastha in Navadvip, Devananda Pandit had a desire. He had no desire to meet him because he did not have sufficient faith in Lord Chaitanya, even though he possessed the required piety. He was a pious person. He was a good guy. But because he had no faith in Lord Chaitanya, his existence was devoid of all the mercy. And without that mercy, there was nothing to be had. In this regard, in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text 3, there is one verse. Shishirata Murlidhara ki jai. There is one verse. Those who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me, O conqueror of enemies. Therefore, return to the path. They therefore return to the path of birth and death in this material world. In a beautiful purport, Srila Prabhupada says, the faithless cannot accomplish this process of devotional service. That is the purport of this verse. Faith is created by association with devotees. Unfortunate people, even after hearing all the evidence of Vedic literature from great personalities, still have no faith in God. They are hesitant and cannot stay fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. Thus, faith is a most important factor for progress in Krishna consciousness. In the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that faith is the complete conviction that simply by serving the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, one can achieve all perfection. I'll read that line again. In Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that faith is the complete conviction that simply by serving the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, one can achieve all perfection. This faith that Devananda Pandit did not have is the basis of all spiritual life. It is the basis of reestablishing our spiritual identity. But he didn't have it. Because not only did he not have faith in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but he did not have faith in the devotees. So what happens to him? After the Lord took sannyas, Devananda Pandit had the good fortune to closely associate with Vrukeshwar Pandit. Vrukeshwar Pandit was very dear to Lord Chaitanya. As soon as he would begin to dance, all the ecstatic symptoms like crying, shivering, perspiring, laughing, roaring, and fainting would appear in his person. By some divine arrangement, Vrukeshwar Pandit came to stay in Devananda Pandit's house. Devananda Pandit was very impressed by Vrukeshwar's radiant appearance and unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Lord. He sincerely began to serve Vrukeshwar Pandit. When Vrukeshwar Pandit would dance, Devananda walked around him with a cane in his hand to keep the crowd from disturbing him. When Vrukeshwar Pandit sometimes fainted due to ecstasy, Devananda would catch him in his arms. He would then take the dust from Vrukeshwar's body and smear it all over his own body with great humility and devotion. Due to this, a strong faith for Lord Chaitanya developed in Devananda Pandit. From this description, one can understand that the statement of the Puranas is that devotion to the Supreme Lord is developed only by serving the pure devotees of the Lord. Devananda Pandit was a very pious, noble person. He was in control of his senses. He was unattached to material things. From his childhood, he studied Srimad Bhagavatam. And in spite of all of these good qualities, for the first half of his life, he did not feel attraction for Lord Chaitanya's lotus feet. He almost missed the boat. Almost missed it. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that service to a pure devotee is even higher than service to the Supreme Lord. It is also said in Bhagavatam, there may be some doubt about the success in attaining perfection by serving the Supreme Lord, but there is absolutely no doubt in achieving perfection by serving the pure devotees of the Supreme Lord. Where could this doubt about serving the Lord arise from? Well, sometimes devotees even think The eye of the Lord is hard to catch. His attention is here and there. He has so many people calling him. How can I hope to gain his attention? So how can I hope that my service will be accepted by him? Sometimes devotees think he has so many devotees who will offer him service. By the time he gets to me, he'll be tired. What need will he have of my service? Sometimes we think my service is not perfect enough, so how will it ever catch the attention of the Supreme Lord? So sometimes there is a doubt in attaining perfection by serving the Supreme Lord. But there is absolutely no doubt in achieving perfection by serving the pure devotees of the Supreme Lord. As we saw with Maharaj Ambarish, the moment Durvasa Muni appeared on the scene, paid his obeisances, Ambarish Maharaj said, wait. He lifted him and embraced him. I have no ill will towards you. My only goal is to live in harmony with you, to serve with you, to serve you. So those servants of the Lord are always just eager to serve with and somehow increase the pleasure of divine service with other devotees. And so there is no doubt about achieving perfection by serving the devotees. This wonderful, amazing pastime has this miraculous, wonderful end. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu begins to speak to Devananda. He says, Devananda, you are the servant of my dear devotee. Now, this is very different from the last time he addressed Devananda. The last time he addressed him was a little, hey, Devananda, you have no learning whatsoever. You forfeited your life. Now, everything is soft and sweet. You are the servant of my dear devotee, Vakreshwar Pandit. By your service to him, you have greatly pleased me. As a result of your service to him, you have come close to me. Whereas the Lord before was running away. Now he says, Devananda, you have come close to me. Vakreshwar is empowered by Krishna Shakti. By serving my dear devotee, you have attained the mercy of Krishna. Hearing these words of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Devananda was overwhelmed with the sentiments of bhakti. His voice was choked with divine emotion, and he said, O my Lord, O Supreme Master, you have appeared in Navadvip just to deliver all the fallen souls. I am a sinner. I have committed great sins against divinity. I have failed to worship your lotus feet, and as a result of this, I have cheated myself out of your causeless mercy. O Lord of all creation, super soul of all that lives, you are supremely merciful. By your causeless mercy, I have been able to take darshan of your holy feet on this day. O Supreme Merciful One, please be kind upon me and instruct me in the goal of life. Please explain the real meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam to me. Hearing this humble request of Devananda Pandit, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke as follows. Listen carefully, O Brahman. Always praise Srimad Bhagavatam. Never let any explanation of Srimad Bhagavatam other than bhakti issue forth from your lips. From beginning, middle to the end, this is its meaning. Constant devotion to Krishna is eternally perfect, flawless, and infallible. It is the highest goal of life. The Supreme Lord appears as innumerable avatars, beginning with Kurma. His appearance and disappearance is transcendental. In this same way, Srimad Bhagavatam is not a material creation. Its appearance and disappearance is completely divine and transcendental. In a trance of Bhakti Yoga, Vyasadeva compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam. It passed through him and appeared on his tongue as a result of the mercy of Sri Krishna. If one does not understand that Srimad Bhagavatam is divine truth on the level of God himself, he will never understand its meaning. This is the verdict of all authorized scriptures. One who understands Srimad Bhagavatam in this way has real knowledge. If one approaches the Srimad Bhagavatam with material knowledge, he will never understand it. However, If one is even unlearned, but takes shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, he will be enlightened with its meaning. The Srimad Bhagavatam is filled with divine love, prema. It is an extension of Krishna himself, and it reveals his confidential pastimes of divine love. O Brahman, previously, you committed an offense to the lotus feet of Srivas Pandit. You must go to him and beg him for forgiveness at his lotus feet. There is no difference between the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. If you get the mercy of the person Bhagavat, the Bhakta Bhagavat, then you will attain the mercy of the book that you have studied throughout your life. Having thus heard the words of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Devananda Pandit immediately went to Srivas Thakur and begged forgiveness for his offenses. At that time, Srivas Thakur embraced Devananda and forgave him all of his offenses. The four directions were filled with the sound of the holy name of Hari as the devotees were all jubilant upon Mahaprabhu's return to Navadvip Dham and seeing this particular pastime. The author of Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat states, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur explains that anyone who sincerely hears this description and narration of Mahaprabhu and the deliverance of the heart of Devananda Pandit will become free from all offenses and will achieve Lord Chaitanya's special mercy of devotional service to Lord Shri Krishna. This is our blessing for this day of Ekadashi, honoring Devananda Pandit on his disappearance, honoring the lives and the stories of our great Vaisnava Acharyas who have come to bless us with their own life lessons. One miraculous thing about the story of Maharaj Ambarish and Durvasa Muni is that Durvasa Muni is actually a self-realized soul. It is stated that later on, Lord Narayan says to Durvasa Muni, you know, you never could have created or committed offenses against my devotees. You are completely dear to me. You are a Brahmin. You've been meditating on me for your entire existence. You are an expansion of Lord Shiva, who is so dear to me. You could never have created these offenses. So how was it that you sought to commit these offenses? Within your heart, I guided you. Within your heart, I guided you to do this, just so that this lesson would be available for all the rest of time, about the nature of my devotees, about the danger of offending my devotees, about what I do to protect my devotees, and how to attain my mercy, even if one has committed offenses against my devotees. So the Lord was guiding Durvasa Muni within the heart. Devananda Pandit was the Sabha Pandit of Nanda Maharaj. This is an eternal position within Goloka Vrindavan. He could not commit any offenses toward any other Vaishnavas. But these Bhagavats, these eternally realized souls, they willingly take on these roles as teaching lessons for us. They willingly take on these thankless tasks. No one thinks, I want to go and enact in a play wherein which I will forget all of the greatness of my dearest Supreme Lord. But these eternally realized souls, they say, I will do it. Whatever Krishna needs from me, I'll do it. If he needs me to go as a lesson, if he needs me to undertake this as a lesson for others, I'll do it. And so Devananda Pandit was an emblem of all good qualities, but was devoid of devotion by the will of the Supreme Lord. And then he commits offenses against Srivas Thakur by the will of the Supreme Lord. And by the will of the Supreme Lord, he comes in contact with Rakeshwar Pandit. And by the will of the Supreme Lord, he is able to beg forgiveness from Srivas Thakur, who does not hold anything against him. embraces him, and all of the devotees engage in uproarious kirtan from seeing this miraculous deliverance of the heart of Devananda Pandit. So, with great gratitude, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaisnava Acharyas, who are like desire trees, who are able to fulfill the desires of everyone, and are able to give us that which we are always searching for: faith in Krishna and love for him, without which our lives and our hearts are like a desert. This divine love is the oasis that we are searching for in the midst of this desert filled with misery, confusion, oppression, heartache, fear. But bhakti, devotional service to the Lord and to each other, can save us from all of that. So thank you for allowing me to serve all of you on this Ekadashi morning. Thank you for taking your time out to listen. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of your comments and your blessings. And I look forward to being with all of you again. Thank you for allowing me to perfect my life and my day in this one moment. If I do nothing else, somehow I must have brought joy to at least one heart of one Vaishnava. And so Krishna must be pleased. He says it himself. So thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vaishnav Thakur ki jai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.